This is the video for the Algebra Regents, January 2018, short response, questions 25 to 37. In question number 25, all that you have to do, it says on the set of axes below, graph this equation. So you want to type this into your y equals. Remember, to do the absolute value, you have to hit second button and then the catalog button, which is the 0, and it will show up as ABS with parentheses. Make sure you type in the x minus 3 inside the parentheses, tab out of it, and then do your +2. When you go to graph it, I would go to the second and table to find the actual points, and then you just graph it. Make sure that you have an arrow on the one side and an arrow on the other side, because it goes on forever and ever in both directions. In question number 26, determine all the zeros. So the zeros are the answers. So there's two different ways that you could do it. You could set it equal to 0 and then do reverse FOIL. What times what is 3? That adds up to -4. Well, that would be -3 and -1. So x minus 3 and x minus 1. Draw your line down the middle, set both sides equal to 0 and solve for x. So you end up with x equals 3 and x equals 1. A totally different way to do it is that you could use the quadratic formula. Remember that the quadratic formula is on your reference sheet. So -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Remember, your a value here would be 1, your b value would be your -4, and your c value would be your 3. So when you go to sub it into the quadratic formula, 4 is a perfect square. So 4 is just 2. So we have 4 plus 2 over 2 and 4 minus 2 over 2. So you end up with those same two answers, 3 and 1. In question number 27, you have to use the formula distance equals rate times time. The distance traveled is equal to the rate of the speed multiplied by the time traveled. That's where we're getting distance equals rate times time. If the distance is measured in feet and the time is measured in minutes, then the rate of speed is expressed in which kind of units? So you know that the distance is feet. We know that the time is minutes. So if we were going to solve for the rate, to get the rate all by itself, we would have to divide by minutes, because this is whatever the rate is times the minutes. So we'd have to divide by minutes, those would cancel out. So the rate equals feet per minute, feet divided by minutes. In question number 28, determine if the point 0,4 is the solution. 0,4 is right here. Now, when you take a look at these, 0,4 is a solution for the solid line, but it is not a solution on the dotted line. Remember, when it's a dotted line, it does not include the points on that line. So is it a solution? No, because the inequality with the dotted line does not include the points on the line. It would be in the solid line, or it would be in the double shaded area, but not right there because it is on the dotted line. In question number 29, I would graph this one. If the zeros of a quadratic function f are -3 and -5, so -3 and -5, that's what we're talking about right there, the zeros where they cross the x-axis, the x-intercepts. What is the equation of the axis of symmetry? So when you take a look at these 2 points, you're counting one place away, one place away, one place away, a second place away, a second place away, a third place away, a third place away. And then this one is right in the middle of those 2. Remember, the axis of symmetry splits it exactly in half. So this is the line x equals 1. All right, it wouldn't be y equals 1. Remember, hazy vixen, all right, with vixen, V is for vertical. So it's x equals 1, because that's halfway in between. You could also just take the -3 plus 5 and then divide your answer by 2. That would be 2 divided by 2, which is 1. That will give you the halfway point between the 2. In question number 30, you're solving for rearranging the equation in terms of R. You want to get the R equals all by itself. To get that R equals all by itself, the first thing that we need to do is I would get rid of the divided by R squared. So I would do times R squared and times R squared. Remember, whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other side. So times r squared and times r squared, those cancel out. Now on this left-hand side, we have r squared times fg. So I would divide by fg and divide by fg. So now we have the r squared all by itself. The opposite of squaring a number is to take the square root of a number. So that's why we're taking the square root of both sides, and you end up with this as an answer. In question number 31, you want to state the correlation coefficient for the data. So you have to remember, you have to turn on your stat diagnostics. If you do not have your stat diagnostics turned on by hitting the mode button, you will not see your R value there, which is the correlation coefficient. So you're going to type these into your L1, you're going to type these into your L2, stat calc, and then you're going to find your correlation coefficient. So when we do that, we get a correlation coefficient, and you're doing a linear one. All right. So you're going to get 0.92 when you round to the nearest hundredth for your R value when you do a linear regression. Explain what the correlation coefficient means with regards to the context of the situation. Well, 0.92, that's really, really close to 1. So that would represent a strong positive correlation. In context of the situation, we're looking at math scores and we're looking at physics scores. As the math scores increase, physics scores also increase because the one has a direct relationship with the other. As the one goes up, the other goes up. In question number 32, could the factors of x plus 2 and x minus 3, could they be factors? Well, you'd set both sides equal to 0 and solve, and you get x equals -2 and x equals 3. Notice that we have -2 as a 0. We have 3 as a 0. So those are answers. Those are factors. Based on the graph, explain why or why not. Yes, because the x-intercepts or zeros of the graph are -2 and +3. That's where they cross the x-axis. In question number 33, Jim is a furniture salesman. His weekly pay is $300 plus 3.5% of his total sales for the week. We want to write a function which could be used to determine his pay. So no matter how much furniture he sells, he automatically gets $300. Plus, he gets 3.5%. Now, making this into a decimal, move your decimal point 2 places over to the left. That's how we're getting 0.035 because we moved our decimal point 2 places to the left, times whatever his sales are. So that's your function. Make sure that you have the P of X there because it says specifically P of X. So you do need that P of X equals when you're writing the function. Use this function to determine Jim's pay to the nearest cent for a week where his total sales are 8,250. So all that you have to do with that 8,250 is sub it in for X into your equation. So when you go and multiply that out, you get $588.75 when you round to the nearest penny. All right, when you round to the nearest penny. In question number 34, Omar has a piece of rope. He ties a knot in the rope and measures the length of the new rope. He represents this process. He repeats this process several times. Some of the data is collected in the table below. So anytime that you have data like this, type it in, do stat edit, type it into your L1 and your L2. State to the nearest tenth the linear regression equation. So stat calc linear regression. That represents this. So when you go to type these in, you're going to get this on your calculator and you're rounding those numbers to the nearest tenth. Explain what the y-intercept means in the context of the problem. Well, the y-intercept is where your graph is going to start because you can't have negative values. You can't have negative measurements of a length of rope. So the y-intercept is where the graph starts. That is the initial length or the starting point, how long the rope is at the beginning of the problem. Explain what the slope means in the context of the problem. By the way, this is your y-intercept in case you forgot. This is 99.2. So that's how long the rope was to start off with. Explain what the slope means. So now we're looking at this -8.5, all right, for your slope in the context of the problem. Well, that's how much shorter the length of the rope gets after each individual knot. It goes down by 8.5 centimeters each time a knot is done. Question number 35, the drama club is running a lemonade stand. All right, cans of lemonade sell for $2 each. Bottles of water sell for $1.50 each. The club needs to raise at least, remember, you have to be at least 16 years old to drive a car. So you could be 16 or higher, all right, because you can be older than 16, so greater than or equal to $500 to cover the cost of the costumes. The students can accept a maximum of 300 maximum. That's the highest it can be. It could be less than that or equal to that, but it can't be more than 360 cans and bottles. Write a system of equations that can be reused to represent it. So cans of lemonade sell for $2 each. So $2 times the number of lemonades plus 150 times the number of waters is greater than or equal to $500. And then we have the lemonade cans plus the water cans or bottles, and that has to be less than or equal to 360. The club sells 144 cans of lemonade. What's the least number of bottles of water that can be used to cover the cost of renting the costume? So we're going to take this 144 and we're going to sub it in for the number of lemonades. So 2 times the number of lemonades plus 150 times the water is greater than or equal to 500. Solve this equation. And when we do that, we get 141.3 repeating. Now, be very careful here. That would not round to 141, all right? You would lose a point if you said that it was 141, or if you said it was 141.3 repeating, you would lose a full point on the Regents, all right? You have to say that they would have to sell 142 because you can't sell a partial partial bottle of water, all right? You can't sell a third of a bottle of water. You're gonna sell the whole bottle. So that would have to, in order to have enough money, they wouldn't have enough money if they just sold 141, but they would have enough money if they sold 142. So be careful there. In question number 36, a manager wants to analyze online shoe sales. So this represents the shoe sales over a 14-hour period of time. The manager believes that the set of integers would be the most appropriate domain. Remember, domain means X, range means Y. They go in alphabetical order for this model. Explain why he is incorrect. Well, why would the set of integers be wrong here for time? All right. He is incorrect because time can't be negative, all right, and can be decimals and fractions. Remember that the set of integers include negative and positive numbers. We can't have negative values for time. You can't have -1 hours of sales or -2 hours of sales. So time can't be negative. So he's definitely wrong there. Plus, you can have 4.5 hours of sales. You could have 4.25 hours of sales. So you can be decimals and fractions of time. State the entire interval for which the number of pairs of shoes is sold is increasing. Increasing is going up. It's in between here and here. So it would be from 0 to 6. All right, it'd be from 0 to 6. This one was sort of a weird one. Technically, the number of sales is always increasing. The sales is never decreasing because you're constantly, if you look at the problem as a whole, you're technically adding more pairs of shoes every time you add it. So technically 0 to 14 was also an acceptable answer on this Regents exam. They sort of modified their answer. They're really looking for this part of the graph that was increasing, but they also accepted 0 to 14. You could say 0 to 6 like this. You could also say 0 to 6 like this. You could have just wrote 0 to 6, or you could have used the notation here with the brackets and did 0, 6 like that. No matter which way you did it, all correct. Determine the average rate of change between the 6th and 14th hour. So now we're taking a look at this part of the graph between the 6th and the 14th hour. So anytime that you have the rate of change, you want to use your slope formula. Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. We want to know between this point right here, 6, 120, and 14, 0 right here. We want to know the average rate of change or the slope. So all points are written X, Y. This is your first point, so these get 1s. This is your second point, so these get 2s. Sub them in. So you have 0 minus 120 over 14 minus 6. You end up with 120 over 8. That is equal to negative 120 over 8, which is negative 15. What does that mean in the context of the problem? A negative 15 in the context of the problem, this is 15 less pairs of shoes sold every hour, all right? Because it's going down 15 over 1, down 15 over 1. So that's really decreasing the number of shoes and increasing the number of hours. So negative 15 less pairs of shoes every hour. Number 37, this is a very, very difficult question, all right? At B's Pet Shop, the number of dogs is initially 5 less than twice the number of cats. So the dogs equal, twice means 2 times. So 2 times the number of cats minus 5, because it's 5 less than. If she decides to add 3 more of each, the ratio will be 3/4. So you got to sort of think back to 7th grade for a second. So when you do a ratio, 3 over 4, we're doing cats over dogs because it goes in the same order. Cats goes first, dogs goes second. So 3 over 4, cats over dogs, equal cats over dogs. This was a hard part of setting it up. We're adding 3 to each one. So cats plus 3 over dogs plus 3. That's a very difficult proportion to set up. Write an equation or a system of equations that can be used to find the number of cats and dogs. So what you would do here is you would cross multiply. All right. When you go to solve a proportion like this, you have to cross multiply. 3 times d plus 3 in parentheses. So you have to distribute. 4 times c plus 3. You have to distribute. So we end up with 3d plus 9 equals 4c plus 12. Go ahead and solve this. So when we go to solve it, you can't have a D and a C in the same problem, but we know that D is really 2C minus 5. So you have to take that 2C minus 5 and sub it in for D. Very, very difficult question. So now that we have C's, now we can just solve that equation, distribute, get all the letters onto one side, get all the numbers onto one side, and you end up with C equals 9. All right, so cats equal 9. Could B's Pet Shop initially have 15 cats and 20 dogs? Well, I did my work for this question down here. All right, this is the work for this question. So when you go to do it, I would just sub in the 15. All right, I would sub in the 15 cats into the equation. So 2 times 15 minus 5. You end up with D equals 25. So if she had 15 cats, you'd have to have 25 dogs. So can she have 20 dogs? No, because when we sub in the 15 for cats, we end up with 25 dogs. So that's not true. Determine algebraically the number of cats and dogs B had initially in her pet shop. So now we're taking this answer that we got here, the C equals 9, and subbing it into that original equation to find the dog. So 2 times 9 minus 5, which is 13. Again, very, 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 very difficult question here. So this is what your, if you add up all your points, the passing score on this one was a 27. So all you really needed was 27 total credits to pass the Regents.